Coming up on Arirang News, with South Korea and Japan meeting Tuesday at the WTO to discuss Japan's export restrictions, Seoul's top negotiator says he's looking at taking the next step and setting up an appeals panel if Japan won't discuss the matter proactively. No deal between Seoul and Washington on the cost of stationing American troops in South Korea. Talks today fell through as the U.S. side insisted Seoul pay billions of dollars more than it already does. And though North Korea says it's no longer interested in talking with the U.S., a South Korean official says the Trump administration is still looking for a way forward. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea and the U.S. have cut short their latest round of talks on sharing the cost of stationing American troops on the Korean peninsula. The talks that began Monday were supposed to last through Tuesday, but they decided to end this round, having failed to narrow their differences. For more, we connect to our Foreign Ministry correspondent, Kim Min-ji, who's on the line. Min-ji, fill us in.
Devin, it's an unprecedented development. Less than 2 hours after the talks began this morning, Seoul's Foreign Ministry announced that the talks had come to an abrupt close. It said the negotiations did not go as initially planned, as Washington was seeking a massive increase, whereas Seoul is unchanged in its stance that the figure must be fair and acceptable. Just about an hour ago, Seoul's chief negotiator, Jeong Kyeong-doo, who's been leading the South Korean team, held a press briefing where he told reporters that the U.S. was trying to drastically raise Korea's share by establishing new articles under the cost-sharing agreement. He said the Seoul stance is unchanged and the figure must be mutually acceptable and within the framework of the Special Measures Agreement. Jeong added that they will do their best to ensure Seoul shoulders a fair share in a way that it strengthens the alliance.
Now, Min-ji, I understand the U.S. side also hastily arranged a press conference earlier today.
That's right, Devin. U.S. Chief Negotiator James DeHart said that the proposals put forward by Seoul were not responsive to their request for a fair and equitable burden sharing. Now, he added that the talks were cut short in order to give Seoul some time to reconsider and put forward new proposals that would enable both sides to work towards a mutually acceptable agreement in the spirit of their alliance. Now, he didn't take any questions from the press, but we were told that the U.S. side walked out of the negotiations first. Now, just to give you some background, since 1991, Seoul has shared defense costs with the U.S. under the Special Measures Agreement. Under the current one-year deal, which expires at the end of the year, Seoul agreed to pay $870 million, an increase from the previous deal of more than 8%. Now, this time, Washington reportedly called on Seoul to pay $5 billion, which is more than a five-fold increase. While officials in Seoul say that a date has been set for the next round of talks, some readjustments may be needed given what happened today. Mind you, the year-end deadline is approaching, but if the two sides are unable to conclude an agreement, Seoul and Washington did make it possible to extend the current agreement in preparation of a possible lapse. Back to you, Devin.
Kim Min-ji, thank you for that. Meanwhile, North Korea says it has zero interest in holding denuclearization talks with the United States unless Washington drops what Pyongyang calls its hostile policy against the regime. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The impasse in the denuclearization negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington appears likely to rumble on. North Korea's former top negotiator in nuclear talks, Kim Yong-chol, says the regime has no interest in holding denuclearization negotiations with the United States until Washington stops acting in such a hostile way towards the regime. The statement, carried by the North State-run Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday, quoted the vice chairman of the ruling Workers' Party Central Committee as demanding the U.S. withdraw from combined military exercises with South Korea or completely stop the exercises. Kim added that postponing the combined military exercises does not guarantee peace and security on the Korean peninsula, nor does it help diplomatic efforts to solve the problem. Kim's statement came just hours after another senior North Korean official, Kim Gae-kwan, made similar remarks, saying the North is no longer interested in talks that bring nothing to the regime. The advisor to the North's foreign ministry said Pyongyang has received nothing in return so far, adding North Korea will no longer gift President Trump something he can boast of at home. Kim is apparently referring to President Trump's repeated claims that he averted war with North Korea by holding 3 summits with Kim Jong-un, and securing a suspension of the regime's nuclear and missile tests. Over the weekend, President Trump took to Twitter to urge North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to act quickly and get a deal done on the regime's nuclear program. 이승재, Arirang News.
The North saying it's not interested in talks with the U.S., but South Korea's Unification minister has been meeting with top officials in Washington, and he says the U.S. is still looking at ways to get the talks going again. Kim Jae-hee has the latest.
Seoul's Unification Minister Kim Yeon-chul says Washington is reviewing various ways to hold successful talks with Pyongyang.
The United States appears to be considering various options for successful denuclearization talks with North Korea.
His remarks come after meeting with U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy, Stephen Biegun, in Washington on Monday, on his first trip to the U.S. since becoming minister. Kim said the two discussed ways to resume the stalled denuclearization talks between Washington and Pyongyang.
We also had an honest conversation about the creative and flexible approach needed for successful denuclearization talks.
Kim added the two also discussed the issue of South Korean-built facilities at North Korea's Mount Kumgang and UN sanctions on North Korea.
We had wide-ranging discussions on inter-Korean projects, including the issue of the South Korean resort at the North's Mount Kumgang. There's still much left to discuss regarding UN sanctions on North Korea.
Kim's remarks come after North's state-run Korean Central News Agency quoted two North Korean officials denouncing the U.S. Some U.S. media have been reporting that North Korea's statements are an attempt to pressure President Trump to gain an advantage in negotiations as he battles an impeachment inquiry. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense minister Jeong Kyeong-doo is heading to Saudi Arabia to boost bilateral defense cooperation with the kingdom. It's his first official visit there since becoming defense chief in September last year. Minister Jeong was invited by Riyadh following Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to South Korea in June, the first by a Saudi crown prince in 21 years. Jeong recently attended celebrations in Seoul for Saudi Arabia's 89th National Day and met the country's ambassador. He returns to South Korea on Saturday. With the recent collapse of a treaty between them, the U.S. and Russia are now technically able to deploy intermediate-range missiles around the world. But China has reportedly warned South Korea and Japan not to host such weapons. According to Japan's Asahi Shimbun, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi told his South Korean and Japanese counterparts during their talks in August that should Seoul and Tokyo deploy U.S. missiles, it will severely impact their relations with Beijing. According to the report, South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa responded by saying China should first withdraw its retaliatory measures regarding Seoul's deployment of the THAAD anti-missile system. That was around the time Washington withdrew from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, accusing Russia of violating it. President Moon Jae-in will hold a televised town hall meeting with some 300 citizens this evening in a special carried live by local broadcaster MBC. To mark the start of the second half of his 5-year term, the South Korean leader will answer randomly selected questions about his administration while explaining the direction of his policies.
We look forward to the people's thoughts being delivered directly to the president. We expect this forum will be a place of unity and true interaction as we look for the right way to go based on the president's answers.
Arirang TV will also bring you live coverage of the 100-minute session from 8 p.m. Korea time with simultaneous English interpretation. President Moon will not be informed of the questions beforehand. He'll be the first South Korean president to take questions in such a format. President Moon has ordered the use of all possible means to rescue the people still missing from a ship that caught fire this morning in waters near South Korea's southernmost island of Jeju. So far, one person's been confirmed dead and 11 others are unaccounted for. In a text message relayed by his spokesperson, President Moon called on all related ministries and organizations to take the utmost care in managing the rescue. The president also told those in charge to keep the families of the victims informed. That includes the families of the boat's 6 Vietnamese crew members whose families the president said should be contacted and given help to visit Korea if they wish. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is already an important partner for South Korea in many sectors, including business and culture. Now in the second part of a series on the upcoming ASEAN summit in Busan, our Yoon Jung-min takes a closer look at how both South Korea and ASEAN benefit from these ties.
Southeast Asia is one of South Korea's closest neighbors geographically, economically, and socially. The two first established a partial partnership in 1989 and upgraded it to a full dialogue partnership in 1991, and now ASEAN is South Korea's second largest trading partner and third largest investment market. As of 2018, the trade volume between South Korea and ASEAN reached over $159 billion. Exports from Korea to ASEAN amounted to around $100 billion, while imports from ASEAN to Korea were more than $59 billion. Seoul is bolstering its ties with a broader regional bloc as well. In early November, South Korea, ASEAN, and other key partners, including China, Japan, and Australia, reached an agreement in Bangkok over the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
At a critical time when protectionism is threatening the global economy, we agreed on the significance of the free, open, and rule-based RCEP more than at any other time.
Experts stress the importance of diversifying partners, especially with ASEAN amid growing global uncertainties.
Under the U.S.-China intensified competition, and also we are facing the Korea-Japan trade disputes. Under those circumstances, we need to alternative production site and production, so we need ASEAN as the main partner for them.
The two sides have been also expanding cultural ties. For more exchanges, the ASEAN-Korea Center was established in Seoul in 2009, and the ASEAN Culture House opened in Busan in 2017. In 2018, nearly 9 million South Koreans visited ASEAN countries, as Southeast Asia is a popular tourist destination for Koreans. Going the other way, more than 2 million people from ASEAN visited Korea last year.
And we are emphasizing the importance of people-to-people exchange and heart-to-heart exchanges. In that regard, K-pop and K-drama, K-food, and even K-beauty are popular in ASEAN countries.
Some experts also point out the possibility of three-way cooperation by South Korea, North Korea, and ASEAN in the future, as Pyongyang has been also maintaining its partnership with ASEAN. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's relationship with Thailand in particular goes back decades. The two countries' exchanges continue to grow and are expected to bring benefits to both sides in terms of culture, high tech, and future industries. Ji-young tells us more.
The Kingdom of Thailand is well known for its natural beauty, from the sandy beaches of Phuket to the grassy plains and rolling hills of the Golden Triangle. The nation of nearly 70 million people is also known for its tourist-friendly policy. With a GDP of around $500 billion, Thailand is the second largest economy in the ASEAN region and the world's 25th largest. Embracing a free market economy and home to a growing middle class, Thailand's GDP grew 4.1% last year, and its per capita income has risen to around $7,200. Thailand has a strong industrial base and a competitive services sector, especially in tourism and finance. But Thailand's economy is heavily reliant on exports, with outbound shipments accounting for over 70% of the kingdom's GDP, highlighting its vulnerability to external factors. It is feeling the direct impact of a global economic slowdown and uncertainties regarding trade tensions between the U.S. and China, as well as South Korea and Japan. South Korea and Thailand established diplomatic ties in 1958 and have become key economic partners since then, with their trade volume reaching $14.1 billion last year. Thai exports to South Korea amounted to roughly $5.6 billion last year, including timber, food products, aluminum, and PC components. On the other side of the ledger, South Korea shipped about $8.5 billion worth of goods to Thailand last year, mainly steel products, semiconductors, and synthetic resin. Seoul and Bangkok have vowed to jointly promote free trade and signed an MOU to strengthen bilateral cooperation to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution and the emergence of new industries such as biohealth and robotics. During his visit to Bangkok in September at the South Korea-Thailand Business Forum, President Moon Jae-in said Thailand's culture and tourism industry, in combination with the Korean wave or Hallyu, could serve mutual benefits for both countries. Ji-young, Arirang News.
On Tuesday, local time, representatives of South Korea and Japan will be meeting in Geneva at the WTO to discuss Tokyo's trade restrictions on Seoul. The meeting comes after South Korea filed a complaint about the trade curbs. And before they meet, Seoul's top negotiator is saying he might consider going ahead with the next step of the dispute settlement process. Kim Yo-sun reports.
South Korea's chief negotiator for discussions with Japan at the World Trade Organization says Seoul is mulling the possibility of pushing for the establishment of a panel at the WTO's dispute settlement body if the two sides fail to find common ground on Tokyo's export curbs.
We will push for the next step, which is to establish a related panel if Japan does not engage in consultations in a proactive manner.
Speaking to reporters in Geneva on Monday, Jeong Kyeong-doo, Director General of Multilateral and Legal Affairs at the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, added he will exert his utmost efforts to resolve the trade route through dialogue. He will sit down with his Japanese counterpart Junichiro Kuroda. During the meeting, Seoul will continue to claim that Tokyo has violated a set of international trade rules, including Article 11 of the WTO's General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which bans regulations on export volumes unless the products have a serious impact on national security. Tokyo is expected to stress it has not violated WTO regulations, adding its measures are the result of Seoul's weak export management. Last month, the two sides failed to reach an agreement in their first talks in Geneva in connection with Seoul's complaint over Japan's export curbs on three key materials required for the production of semiconductors and other high-tech materials. It remains to be seen whether the two sides can reach an agreement this time. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for making time.
Thank you very much for having me.
So anticipation continues to build for this trade deal between the U.S. and China. The Trump administration's pushed back its ban on companies doing business with Huawei for another 90 days. Wall Street slightly higher yesterday. What's the story there and in the markets today?
Yes, as you said, the Department of Commerce of the U.S. has again extended the temporary general license allowing the American companies to sell to Huawei, which is the Chinese tech giant, particularly a leader in the 5G area. This announcement is fairly good news for Huawei as well as for American tech companies who relies on Huawei as the key customer. And basically, if you look at the Huawei's equipment, it is very inexpensive relative to U.S. makers. So that is very important for the overall tech industry. But the department also have said that it will continue to rigorously monitor sensitive technology export to ensure that the innovations are not harnessed by those who threaten the national security. That's what the Secretary Wilbur Ross said in a statement on Monday. But in any case, it seems that the process seems to be moving in a positive direction. So therefore, we think that the equity market should be doing okay accordingly. If you look at the Dow and S&P and NASDAQ, because of the some of the technical corrections, the indices really didn't move much. But for the Asian market, other than Japan down by 0.5%, Chinese equity market was up strongly by 0.85% for Shanghai, and Shenzhen's actually up by 1.8%.
Right. Well, of course, shares in New York do keep climbing higher and higher. But what's the situation here in Korea? Obviously, a lot more concern locally.
Well, I mean, I think that everybody's looking at what's happening to the foreign investors' direction for Korea. And foreign investors been a major net seller since the 7th of this month to the 18th of this month. And the total net selling amounted by about 1 trillion won. So foreign investors were selling because the Korean won appreciation was too fast. We think that appreciation was a little bit over-exceeded. And because of that, the foreign investors' net buying are not really coming through. And the key question mark is that the index changes, the MSCI index changes, that affects negatively for Korea versus it affects positively to China. So the foreign investors are selling of Korea and buying of China, which seems to be putting pressures to the equity market. And also, if you look at the economic growth rate, it comes out that Korea has slowed down much more significant than any other countries in Asia. And we're actually looking at below 2% growth rate. At the beginning of the year, we're looking at close to 3%, 2.7% growth rate has come down quite significantly. So having said that, people have some doubts on fundamental long-term picture for Korea, as well as foreign investors selling out of Korea and buying China on back of the MSCI index changes.
Well, speaking of fundamentals, next year's government budget in Korea, more than 500 trillion won, the so-called super budget. It's gotten even bigger, slightly, as it's reviewed in Parliament, adding about 10 trillion won. Now, some say this will strain the state's finances. Others say it won't. Briefly, what's your view?
My view is that it won't put any dent to the overall fundamentals of the government budget, government balance sheets. If you look at the government debt level, it is only at 40% of GDP. Even you include all the regional debt, it comes in at probably less than 70% of GDP. So we do need a very strong budget in order to boost the economy. We definitely need fiscal stimulus in addition to the monetary stimulus that we've been seeing from the rate cut twice this year. The people have, however, the doubts about where the monies are spent and does it have any long-term plan. That is a question mark. Given the fact that we are in an era where we are competing on the fourth industrial revolution industries, and global competitiveness is most important in order for Korea to succeed in terms of achieving above 2% growth rate. So yes, the budget is needed. The question mark is where it is spent.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, that's where we'll have to wrap it up today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, work begins today to expand Incheon International Airport with an investment of about $4.2 billion. To meet growing demand, the money will be invested gradually through 2024 to build a fourth runway, expand Terminal 2, and build other facilities. When it's done, the airport's capacity is expected to rise to more than 106 million passengers a year, with each terminal able to manage more than 50 million each. The Transport Ministry expects that would make Incheon the world's third biggest airport by passenger capacity after Dubai and Istanbul. In Paris last weekend, a pop-up store called Sweet Seoul opened in two places in the city to show off Korea's traditional desserts. It was open for 2 days at both the Galeries Lafayette department store and at a Korean restaurant with 2 Michelin stars. 5 Korean dessert chefs were there to present traditional treats made from sticky rice, nuts, and fruit. The Seoul Metropolitan Government's holding the event to introduce Korea's culture and food during Seoul Week, which runs from November 14th to the 21st. The pop-up store will also open in New York for 2 days, starting Wednesday. And this just in, unionized workers at the state-owned railway corporation, KORail, have announced they'll go on strike for an indefinite period of time from 9 a.m. on Wednesday. This is expected to disrupt railway links across the country. We'll have more updates on that in our 7 p.m. newscast. That's all for this hour. Thank you for watching.